meeting of the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee to order. Have the full complement of council members Alarcon, Zion, and myself, Paul Koretz. I'd recommend one item for consent, item number 4, that we can concur with the Public Safety Committee to note and file that report without objection. And then I suggest that we begin by hearing item 1 and item 6 together. So if we could call those items.
Closed session.
Cheers.
Item 1 is a memorandum from the mayor, and this is regarding the exemption of 1 community housing program manager, 1 financial development officer 1, and 1 project coordinator for the housing department.
And item 6, because we'll hear them together.
Okay. Item 6, personnel department has submitted a report, and city attorney will be reporting. This has to do with the Community Redevelopment Agency employee hiring options for available positions within the city.
All right, if we could hear a report on particularly item number 1 and the recommended positions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Rushmore Cervantes with the Housing Department, and as was stated for the record, the department is requesting the exemption of 3 positions that will be key to the transition of the housing assets from the former Community Redevelopment Agency. These would be exempt positions that we would make available both to former CRA employees but open to the public. And as promised at the last committee meeting, the department disseminated through all of the former CRA employees that were noticed that they were going to have their services terminated. They've received emails from their personnel department that the housing department is seeking these 3 positions, and if any of these employees wish to be considered, they are to forward their resumes to the housing department personnel section for immediate consideration for interviews based on their qualifications. And this will be the backbone for the transition of these of the housing and assets. These 3 positions are specific to the loan portfolio, the major project section, as well as the occupancy monitoring sections. Those are the 3 main components that would be transferring over, and this would be the backbone for that transition plan.
And will LAHD look first to former CRA employees for qualified candidates for these positions? And if not, why not?
We will notice set the notice to all of the former CRA staff. We will, since they have the experience, they would obviously be ideal candidates for the position. But we certainly have to open it up to all candidates. But we would certainly look to the former CRAs first.
Do we have legally the technical ability to give them any kind of a priority?
Not that I'm aware of.
And City Attorney's Office, what's your opinion on this?
Well, as you'll note, item number 6 is noted to recess if necessary. So if you want to go into the legalities of the memo that has been submitted to you, then we would need to go into closed session on that issue.
Well, maybe we can do that when we've asked all our other questions.
Okay.
If this transition is only going to take 6 months at most, which I believe is what's expected, will the old CRA assets blend into the LAHD portfolio, or will they be managed differently by different people?
They would be managed by separate people. You'd actually have a number of projects that are either pre-development acquisition phase or mid-construction. Those projects that would be transferred over would be managed by the staff that would be hired for that purpose. The same would hold true with the occupancy monitoring as well as the loan portfolio. We would have dedicated staff for those positions.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Alarcon?
So what is the justification for hiring exempt positions?
The justification is to the intent is for potentially short-term positions. Certainly when it comes to the loan portfolio, the major projects, these are projects that are in construction. Much like the former CRA and the designated local authority, their purpose is to wind down. That means they're going through the existing projects and see them through fruition. So on the major project side, we would do the same. We would actually ensure that those projects come to their fruition. At that point, those positions would no longer be needed for the city as it relates to those positions.
Do they have a specific time period?
We don't have a specific time period for all the projects because some are going into construction now where they have full funding or partial funding. Partial being that the remaining portion of the funding will come from the recognized obligation payment schedule.
Mm-hmm.
The projects that are in acquisition pre-development phase.
I'm actually talking about the exempt employees. Is there a time frame?
No, there is not. The time frame for the exempt positions are tied, specifically for the major project, is tied to the projects themselves. The time frame for the loan portfolio and occupancy monitoring, those are longer term, Councilman. The typical loans are 30 years. Occupancy monitoring, the covenants last for approximately 55 years. So the back end of what's being transferred to the city are long-term obligations to manage the portfolio.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm not trying to follow you here.
Okay.
There's 3 positions we're considering.
Correct.
Which ones are short-term, which ones are long-term?
The position, well, they're all, okay, let me just clarify. It's a technicality. All 3 are basically exempt, which means they can be terminated at any given time.
That's not my
But
question.
I understand. I'm getting to that.
Short-term, long-term.
Right. The function, I'm referring to the function. The function of the major projects is short-term. The other 2 positions could potentially be long-term. Your question as to why we're going exempt.
Right.
It affords the city the ability to bring employees from outside the civil service process, which the CRA is not within the CRA. It was not within the city civil service structure.
But for short term, I understand the need to hire exempt employees for the short term. I'm not understanding why we need exempt employees for long-term positions.
Councilman, what we're trying to do is trying to bring in the best candidates possible for all 3 major areas. This affords the city the opportunity to bring in former CRA staff who perhaps may be most knowledgeable and best prepared to take on those positions. If they were civil service positions, we would not be able to do that.
Is largely due to their technical expertise, which is
Yep.
under Charter Section 1001B.
Correct.
And that's exactly what the exemption, that's the recommendation is under Charter Section 1000B, 1001B.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is my understanding of exempt employees is when they that there is either a need to be let me put it this way. In civil service departments, we don't typically have exempt employees. They're usually political appointments. So city council officers, the mayor, and the city attorney have, and I believe the controller has a couple as well, they have exempt employees. But in civil service departments, they're typically civil service employees, and the definition for that has to do with the duration of time they're expected to work. So if it's a short-term position, you hire exempt, but if it's a long-term position, you seek to have a civil service position. I'm not getting a clear picture from you as to what your intent is going forward. In other words, if your intent is to have employees long-term, you could hire short-term exempt employees, but then after which they should be given an opportunity to compete under a civil service opportunity.
Based on what classification they're in and what kind of qualifications they may have and what's available, Councilman, going this route gives the city and the House Department the most flexibility in order to be able to offer jobs to employees that perhaps are not within the city's system right now. Without getting into specifics, it seems to me that it offers opportunities for
understand
former
what
CRA staff.
I understand what you're saying.
So
I just want to make sure we do it in the best way possible.
I believe that this is the best way possible in short term to be able to bring employees on. Again, the positions that are for occupancy monitoring and loan portfolio management, those are long-term duration positions. That function is long-term. The nature and by which
When you
we are
say
bringing
long term, are you talking
Well,
2 years or
30
years?
30 years to 55 years. Loans last upwards of 30 years.
So it's a permanent position.
Well, the function is
That's
long-term.
permanent. I mean, come on,
Well-
30 years?
Exactly.
If I may, Councilman, just
Please.
for clarification, the characterization of a position as exempt doesn't determine the duration of time. So there's no nexus necessarily to a short-term position versus a long-term position. It's the description of the position. I mean, you have positions in the council office, the mayor's office, et cetera, that are exempt, and you have people that have been in those positions 4 years or beyond the term of any particular elected official. The charter also doesn't distinguish under the exemption as to whether or not the position is short-term or long-term. So I just don't want that issue to get confused.
Well, no, I with all due respect, I beg to differ. There is a policy consideration, and it has to do with whether you provide longstanding support for the concept of a civil service system, or whether you bend the policies to allow for exemptions. And it's just not a traditional concept for the housing department to have non-civil service positions. So the duration is important because the department has historically had civil service jobs. And if we're going to move away from civil service jobs, I believe it runs counter to the spirit of the civil service system that we have. And so I don't have a problem with hiring exempt positions temporarily, but to deviate from our civil service system on a long-term basis, I have concerns about. And I think a better way to approach this would be to create temporary exempt positions, but with an eye toward establishing full-time permanent civil service positions. Now, if the department wants to avoid the civil service process, then they should say that, because that's the policy consideration.
I understand, and I'm not speaking toward the policy. I'm just reiterating what the charter requires.
Is there not a provision for emergency appointments, and could you not appoint CRA appointees as emergency appointments?
I have no authority to do that. The department has no authority to appoint emergency appointments.
Ms. Sosa, do you agree?
They can go ahead and make emergency appointments, and that would trigger a civil service examination process. I think also, though, with regards to exemption and short-term, there is a provision for grant-funded positions to be exempted for a term of no more than 3 years, and maybe that is what's triggering the discussion, where, again, there's a limited funding source as well. But again, these are various provisions within the charter that allows for certain positions to be exempt from civil service based on possibly technical expertise, which is the case in the housing request.
Yeah, I want to be clear.
But
I think to the extent we're going to deviate from a civil service system, I just think it needs to be done in the full light of day. And clearly, that's what we are doing.
Right.
Now, is there a reason to do it? Maybe. I believe there is, and I don't have a problem with forming temporary positions. But in the long run, if we're talking about long-term positions, we should move toward creating civil service opportunities so that current employees will be able to compete for those positions. And that's not to say that we're not going to bring the CRA folks over too, but if you truly want to get the best qualified people, you want to have a fair competition. And exempt employees, you said all of them will be given, they're required to be given equal consideration. That's not even true. You don't have to give In an exempt position, you can hire anybody you want, basically. I mean, it's
But the department gave its word that it would extend the offer to all former CRA employees, provided they meet the qualifications.
right, but the extent to which you give equal consideration, it's really it's a much more flexible process to hire an exempt employee than it is to hire a civil service employee. But I just want my colleagues to understand that this is a deviation from the civil service process. And I don't think the city should move in the direction away from a civil service process. And to the extent we can preserve it here, that would be my preference. Not to say that we shouldn't bring people over temporarily as exempt employees, but to say that if they're going to be permanent, they should be civil service.
So, I guess this is probably a discussion we'll have in closed session, but it's
I got a couple questions.
and I just want to follow up on Mr. Alarcon, then I'll take your questions. My understanding is that then the people that we would hire on a temporary basis from among the civil service positions then wouldn't be able to compete for those positions as civil service. So we could only hire them temporarily. We would then, even if they had clearly the best qualifications, couldn't hire them permanently.
Let me just comment. Civil servants can compete for non-civil service positions.
But if you have
Right.
non-civil servants at CRA, they couldn't compete.
They can
longer.
go ahead and compete for those permanent positions as long as they meet the requirements and it's available to the general public. So there's nothing to preclude them, should at some point housing decide that there are permanent civil service jobs as a result of the new function that they're absorbing from the CRA, and they determine that there are civil service positions that are needed to be able to perform those duties and responsibilities. Those temporary employees, if they meet the requirements, they can compete for the positions.
Okay. Mr. Zine, your questions?
Thank you. Do we have any civil service positions for these exempt categories you're looking to fill? Do we have any civil service employees within your department
That
fill
perform like functions, yes, we do.
How many?
I want to say in the range of, with these three positions, the positions that they would, the functions they would perform, Councilman, I would probably say in the range of about 50.
Okay. So we're looking for, on the exempt positions, we currently have civil service employees that perform similar or same functions.
Like functions, correct.
Like functions, okay. And is that position a higher salary than other positions in your department?
The positions that we're bringing them in will be, and the functions they will provide will be, they'll be paid comparable to their counterparts that'll be in civil service positions. We will not pay anyone higher than someone that's performing the same function that's within a civil service classification.
But do you have other city employees in similar or in lower paying positions within your department who could compete for those three positions?
Provided they meet the qualifications, yes, Councilman.
And they're being excluded from that process?
They are not being excluded. We'll offer up the opportunity for employees within the department to compete for those jobs, as well as former CRA employees, provided they meet the qualifications. Well, they'll be in a classification that is exempt, but they're on protected leave from their existing civil service classification, so they are protected.
So I'm trying to
They'd retain bumping rights.
Correct.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm trying to figure out why, if we have civil service positions and we have civil service employees who may want to receive this promotion, this additional compensation, why don't we have them compete for that in lieu of this process of three exempt positions? Why can't we just have those folks compete internally instead of opening the door and make them exempt and keep them civil service?
Three positions would, in this particular scenario, would still need to be requested, and it would just be a matter of at a lower level so that we could promote from within up to that level that they were requesting and then backfill from the lower levels.
Why
But
can't we do that?
We
See,
could.
the troubles me on exempt positions is it plays a lot of favoritism many times. It's not fair to those people who have gone through the testing process and done their time and look for promotions within that particular department, whether it be the fire department or the planning department. And that's why we have a cap, and as a former charter commissioner, we put a cap on exempt positions so we wouldn't have a situation where we would have nepotism, if you want to call it, where people get positions and other people get slighted. That's the concern I have with the exempt positions.
Right.
Unless it's very selective, but it's not very selective because you already got people doing that.
Similar functions, the individuals that are performing the work at the former CRA bring with them
Right.
a unique skill set that's a little different than what our staff does. They're similar, but not doing the exact same thing, and they have a working knowledge of the work that's going to be transferred. So by virtue of going through with an exemption process like this, I think that it affords the department and the city the means by which to attract the best qualified people for the department and the city to maintain the housing assets that are being transferred.
And what's the salary for the positions that you're looking for?
There's a range. I'm sorry, Councilman, I don't have that at my fingertips.
Does anyone have that? Gloria?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Because I find it ironic that we have, in this budget, a process where departments are being cut back, and my empathy goes to the CRA folks. They chose to work at CRA, and what happened with CRA is a tragedy, but the fact is, I think we owe responsibility to city employees who are already within the city family, which CRA folks are not in the city family. Go ahead.
I have those ranges for you. Project coordinator, the range is 60 to 80,000. Financial
60 to 80,000?
60 to 80,000. Financial development officer is 85 to 105, and community housing programs manager is 100 to 120,000.
So those are
Per year.
substantial salaries.
They are substantial salaries. These are the positions that the department is looking to secure to be the leads for each of the three sections that I mentioned that would be transferring to the housing department.
And then what about pensions? What happens to pensions if folks come over from CRA? How does that pension work?
I couldn't answer that, Councilman.
Gloria?
I'm not very well versed in that at all, but I believe the CRA, their pension system, are they CalPERS?
Yes.
And we are LACER, so I'm not
I
sure about
understand.
reciprocity and so forth.
Okay, so that's a question on how that would
There
come
is
into play.
reciprocity.
I would think so.
I am familiar.
Okay.
Well, the
We have
CalPERS
an
is in a great deficit, and I don't think LACERS is in such a great deficit
But there
It's
still is the
difficult.
opportunity for reciprocity,
to buy in.
possibly, yes.
So how many openings do you currently have at the housing department? Top and
I
down.
believe our vacancy rate is, I believe, around 50 employees, 50
Okay.
positions, excuse me.
And current number of staff total?
With regular authority and resolution authorities, it's approximately 600.
Okay, so 600, 50 openings. How many CRA staff were laid off?
I don't know that number. I believe it's in the range of approximately 100. They are on administrative leave effective June 15th, and their services will be terminated at the end of this month, and they'll be down to a staffing level of approximately 57. That number could vary, but that's
I think
around
I
the range.
recall there being a possible layoff number of up to 200.
That worked for the city? Or that did city CRA activities for LA City?
Just
I
CRA
believe so.
employees.
Okay. So if you have 50 positions that are opened, some of those were positions where CRA folk, or department, housing department employees were given pink slips? Were there any pink slips given on the 50 openings that you have?
No positions were eliminated in the House Department that resulted in a layoff
So
notice.
they all attrition or moved off for something else?
That's correct.
So no one got,
There's
Pink
been
slip.
no movement within the housing department that as far as a result of eliminated positions.
Okay.
We were able to move people around to ensure that everyone was protected.
okay. And what about city employees that were given pink slips? Gloria?
You mean this year? We haven't laid off
No,
any
last year, last fiscal year.
2 years ago.
I know
can't
ERIP, I'm not talking about ERIP, I'm talking about people who were basically terminated because of lack of funding.
I want to say, no, there was.
I know
I
there
know
was-
that currently we have 250 individuals that are currently on reserve lists. So
What do you
those
mean
individuals
what do you mean-
were
What do you
laid
mean by
off.
reserve list?
Meaning that they were laid off, and should a vacancy occur in the position that they have civil service status in, they may be considered by that department to return to the city.
Were any of those,
That's for the whole city?
Right, that's for the entire city, and that is as a result of the layoffs we did in 2010. And I want to say 500 to 600 were laid off, but I can't.
so there's like 250 that are looking for work?
Right.
Will this go out to those folks to see if any of them qualify?
These opportunities, these three opportunities, no, not necessarily. This is, again, as far as a reserve list, they would be on a list for which they had civil service status in. So, for example, if I was a clerk typist in general services and I was laid off, I would, if general services had a position that was unfrozen, funded, and they wanted to fill it, they would go ahead and certify that list, and those individuals on the reserve list would become available to general services for appointment. So it's very specific based on what position they left from.
Okay.
But these positions, again, if housing elected to, they can certainly list those on the Personnel Department website for anyone who might be interested in applying for these jobs. These jobs are available to anyone that meets the requirements.
We'll see, when I look at a salary of 60,000 on the low end, 125 on the top end with benefits and pension, that's a considerable package that I'm sure a lot of people would be very happy to obtain. And we want to be fair to provide those opportunities. And while the CRA folks lost those positions, we need to be fair with everyone, including the city employees that may have lost positions due to budget funds.
Right.
And I want to be fair with them to let them know that, there's positions available that you may be able to compete for, because there's a lot of people looking for work.
Right. And we regularly do list exempt opportunities on the Personnel Department website.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I think we will want to discuss this in closed session. Before we do, there are a couple members of the public that have asked to speak. Michael Miller with AFSCME Local 585 and Steve Koffroth, also with AFSCME.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Miller, and I am First Vice President of AFSCME Local 585. We represent CRA. I am still currently a Senior Finance Officer for CRA, and my work is directly involved in housing and finance. I manage a conduit bond portfolio, and I've closed about 16 housing transactions over 6 years that I've worked for CRA. I'm here to talk to you today because we AFSCME and the employees of CRA believe that AB 126 requires that with the city taking on the role of housing successor, we believe that it requires you to also take on the employees who are doing those functions. Make no mistake about it, this is about money, and we know that from the demise of CRA. I manage a portfolio that generates $550,000 a year. There's another loan portfolio that generates $11 million a year. We've got employees who do the monitoring function, pre-development function, who do different functions from that which are done at LAHD. There are no better trained people in the city to perform this work that we've been doing all this time than CRA employees. My time is running short. I'll just close by saying that you can do this. We know that the city, with previous retirements and so forth, have been able to work through these issues, and we believe reciprocity would work in this case. We're willing to work under the city's MOU. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I've spoken to you before and spoken before council a number of times, so I won't belabor many of the issues, but one of the things that I did want to address was the report that's listed under item number 6. And this is the report from personnel and the CLA and CAO's office regarding the ability to hire CRA staff. We certainly do not want to come in and step on anyone's toes regarding opportunities for upward mobility. But we do believe that we have staff who are highly technical and have expertise that is not found yet in the city staff. But we believe that there's one glaring deficiency in the report that's before you, and ask that this one thing at a minimum be considered, and that is that the city has treated the CRA much like any of its other departments that it manages, the proprietary departments, in controlling their budgets, controlling their hiring, controlling their terms and conditions of employment. And in fact, for our current MOU, you had a member of the CAO's office was the chief negotiator. So for the city to say that these employees are not part of the city family is a big misrepresentation. The city, through its oversight ordinance, which has been in place for 20 some odd years, it has put into place, it is defended in court, and it has actively engaged in the control of the lives of these employees. And that cannot be disregarded with respect to their ability to transfer into the city function, especially when as a function of the dissolution, they are being transferred, or their functions and the jobs that they are performed are being transferred to the city. We ask for that to be considered. Bring the employees in where you can, certainly before external candidates. Honor what you can with respect to their benefits. It is true that they have reciprocity, so the retirement issue is not an issue of concern for our members. So we ask you to take that into consideration as you move forward with these positions. We support the hiring of these positions. There's going to be much more than 3. It's probably going to be upwards of 15 to 20 when you consider the monitoring, the bond, and the construction phase. So we just want to make sure that to the extent possible, that the CRA employees are offered those opportunities to come and continue their work with the city family. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I've got one more question. How do the salaries compare what the city's offering from their current salaries or their previous salaries? Yes. The current, as we heard, 60,000 to 125.
Yeah.
How does that compare to the current or their previous salary structure?
When you're talking about the actual occupancy monitoring function, we believe the salaries are comparable. The construction and the city salaries are probably lower. And on the finance side, they're pretty close, although a little bit lower than what the CRA functions are. But I can tell you that if given the choice between being employed or taking a small salary cut, that CRA employees would be willing to make those sacrifices. Okay. At least offered the opportunity to do that. Okay. The CAO's report initially reported that the salary was across the board 30% lower, but I believe that was measuring title to title and not function to function.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council member, before we move on, did you want to take action on item 1, or do you want to wait until you've heard item 6 in closed session
I think we probably want to discuss item 6 in closed session.
with item before taking action on 1? And then lastly, do you want to consider your other items before going into closed session?
Might not be a bad idea for the convenience of those folks that are not here for those items. So I will take that suggestion and move on to item number 2.
The city administrative officer has submitted a report. This has to do with the authority to execute a professional services agreement with AN Solutions to provide new updated computer software and workflow for the management of workers' compensation claims data.
Good afternoon, Dave Noltmeyer, Personnel Department. If the committee would desire, we could give a brief overview of the report, or if you'd like, we could just take any questions that you might have related to the report.
If you'd give us a brief overview first, that would be great.
The report before the committee today is to request authority to replace 3 non-integrated workers' compensation systems that we use in administering claims, and the funding to replace the system with the Aon IVOS claim system, which is one integrated system. Currently, the city uses 3 systems to administer claims: the Link system that is used by city staff and the city's third-party administrator to administer the claims. We have a standalone document management system that is used on the civilian side, the eFlow system, and also an A1 law system, which is the litigation system used for the workers' compensation claims. First-year funding requirements to replace those 3 systems with the IVOS system is $3.5 million, with detail contained on page 3 of the report. Basically, the costs involve software cost, implementation costs, maintenance cost, hosting of the system, as well as the equipment costs that will be necessary for the new system. Funding of the project is contained in an unappropriated balance line item, and overall, the basis of replacing the system is outlined on page 5 of the report, but basically it will integrate all of these 3 systems. It will result in over $1.15 million in savings once the system is operational. It will provide claims and litigation enhancement related to administering the claims, as well as provide excellent reporting for the departments that submit workers' compensation claims so that they can identify trends and hopefully implement an action plan to reduce claims in the future. Ongoing maintenance and hosting costs are estimated at $365,000 a year once the system is up and running. Additional representatives from Personnel Department, Information Technology Agency, the CAO's office, and representatives from Aon are also here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, my first question is, my reading of this is that most of the payment of this is largely front-loaded, although I think this is being paid for over a 5-year period. Is that a correct reading? And if so, why are we paying most of that up front?
The first-year cost is a cost to implement the system. That's cost with Aon eSolutions to put their software in place. We will also be utilizing outside consultants to help implement it through ITA's temporary assistance contracts that they have in the area of IT projects. And then the equipment cost, that's $3.5 million in the first year. The report does address that the 5-year contract with Aon eSolutions to implement and then continue hosting of it for up to 5 years, which is approximately $3 million.
So is there a way to pay less upfront so we'd have a little more leverage with the vendor in case things don't go as well as we anticipate?
Actually, that there is a payment plan, so we will only be paying for services rendered by Aon for the system, and there is actually a holdout of $250,000 until the system is actually up and running.
Do we think that's enough to give us some leverage? Because I know in the past, I think we've made some mistakes in that regard.
With regards to the Aon contract and the implementation services, which is overall about $1 million, yes, we feel the $250,000 is sufficient. And then the additional cost, the 3.5, is for the additional outside consultants to assist the city in implementing the program.
Obviously, it's something we need if we're using a program as aged as what we're using
30
currently.
years old.
Questions or comments, Mr. Zion?
30 years is not that old. You look around this room.
Look at me.
People maybe, computers, I don't know.
Well, I'm talking about people. Was there an RFP on this process?
Yes, council member, this RFP resulted from one that was released by the city attorney's office, back in 2008. So it was a competitive bid process.
It took 4 years to get here?
Unfortunately, yes, council member.
Well, thank goodness it wasn't 30 years to get here. And what about history on this vendor? How do they perform and their results in other jurisdictions?
Other jurisdictions, they consider to be very responsive in the sense that they have the premier system in the workers' compensation arena.
You can vouch for that?
Yes, we actually have them here that they can speak to it. We've reached out to their current clients, some of which include the city of San Diego, the county and city of San Francisco, county of Riverside, and the county of San Bernardino. All of them will indicate that it is a very robust and user-friendly system.
And I also implemented them
You are?
into the state fund.
You are?
I'm Dawn Alvarado, the work comp administrator.
And Donna, what do you have to say?
We implemented IVOS into a small part of state fund.
And it
back
worked?
oh, yes. Very
Because
much.
we're always suspect when we get a contract of this magnitude that sometimes it's not the best and sometimes the city shortchanges, and then we go to regret it later. But obviously, the link system, 30 years.
To give you guys, Councilmember Koretz, remember Wang at State Fund? That's what Lynx is with a GUI, a Windows GUI over it. That's what it is. It's that old, and one of the best features of this is our adjusters currently are going in and typing letters,
Right.
one by one in Word. And with IVOS, they're going to pull up the name of the letter. It'll be pre-filled with the data that's in the claim. They're going to hit a button. It's going to go into a machine, get electronic signature, the machine's going to fold it, stuff the envelope, and mail it. Right now, we're printing one by one, signing one by one, folding it, attaching it, and stuffing the envelopes. It's going to change everything, every
you're
aspect of what we do.
You're happy with it?
Oh,
Because I know that if we don't do it properly, there's liability for the city on work
Right.
comp situations, so, okay. As long as you get your stamp of approval, because I have great confidence, since you've had experience in other sectors than this.
yes, I'm very
And
confident.
you've been around how many years?
With the city, 26 years,
4 more, you'll be the Lynx.
which isn't that old.
Councilman, I just would want to add also that we have the support of ITA helping us. If it were the personnel department itself, I would personally have some concerns taking a project on this size, but we have some expert technical assistance from ITA, and they've been working with us on just developing the draft contract that's before you today. And we have very, very high opinion of the staff they've assigned to us for this project.
Good with me.
Mr. Alarcon? anything to
I
add?
was just curious what the caseloads in the workers' comp division.
Right now, on the civilian side, we're at about 135 to 150.
And what's the optimum?
125. On the sworn side, we are going to be at 125. We just awarded for the new contract that'll go in effect in November. And on the sworn, we're finally going to make it down to 125.
And on the civilian with this new system, it's going to remain the same, but
It'll be incredible. What you'll actually be able to adjust a claim the proper way and deliver the proper benefits. And litigation should go down, penalties should go down, and we should have much happier.
so it should expedite the processing of claims and therefore reduce the caseload?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And you reduce clerical support. We will deliver a much better product, and we'll have avenues of less litigation, happier injured workers. They'll get back to work sooner because we'll actually have time to talk to them and talk to the physicians and really do the job the proper way.
And you said it was 08 and it's now 2012. Are we getting an 08 system or a 2012 system?
2012. There's a whole new version of it.
Okay.
And actually, the distribution center that does the letters and fold them, that just came out last year, so.
Okay.
You really like that folding thing, huh?
Well, sometimes we have so lack of staff. I'm in the mailroom opening mail. I spent 3 months in there, so yeah, I'm excited that this is going to fold them and stuff it. Yes.
Oh, that's pretty incredible. This is really great, and I think it'll get us down to operating at a reasonable level, which we haven't in the past. People have much too heavy caseloads, as I've been complaining about since I've been here and knew of long before. So that's great.
Councilmember, one last request if we could make. If it's possible, we're approaching fiscal year end, and the money is in this fiscal year's unappropriated balance. It would be it would save us a step, frankly, going back to council if we could get this scheduled at council and approved this fiscal year.
How do we help make that happen?
I can have that on Tuesday.
So before July 1st.
Yeah, we can direct that. I have one other question, and then we have a speaker from the public also. Was there any way to have this contract be done with an LA-based company?
There is no companies. There's very few systems out there. There's Sistema, which they are based, I think, in Florida. There's another one based up north. Can you guys help us out?
Come on, tell us your competitors.
They might be
Just yell them out, just yell them out.
There's a few competitors. Originally in 2008.
Yeah, just yell them out.
Stephen Thomas, Director of Professional Services for Aon eSolutions, branch of Aon that develops the software IVOS product. Originally back in 2008, when the bid went out for RFP, it was responded by Valley Oak Systems, which is a corporation based in San Ramon, California. Subsequently, in 2008, Valley Oak Systems was acquired by Aon Corporation and decided to put together the best of breed of both risk management systems and claims administration systems. I came from, as a part owner of the Valley Oak Systems company, came across, there was a whole team of us from San Ramon, California, a regional office there with roughly, I think about 80 employees right now, and there's still about 15 employees in the Los Angeles area who work for eSolutions, as well as obviously a huge amount of employees down at the Aon building.
So you are a California-based company, and there is no comparable company in the city of Los Angeles that could do this.
Where are you based now?
The corporate headquarters are in Chicago, but there's an incorporation also in California.
Okay, and we have one speaker from the public, Phyllis Dougherty.
Phyllis Sturden, former city employee. I worked for Workers' Comp in Water and Power, also for the contract coordinator, and of course for the CAO over in City Hall. And I just wanted to compliment the department, the CAO, and this company on the very professional manner in the way this contract was done, and also the questions that you've asked them as far as the stability and the security, particularly if you look at the contract. They've gone into such detail because there's so many different aspects now of liability for the city and for any organization, because not only are you liable for the information, but if there is a leak or something, of course, through these cloud systems and so forth, you are also responsible for how quickly you notify everyone who is affected by that. And that's not something that the city probably is going to be able to do very well. So I'm familiar with this company, and I just wanted to thank you for getting them to come in and bid on this. I hope it works out well, and I hope that you use this same standard, because I have to mention this, the Department of Animal Regulations just wrote a proposal that looks like an 11-year-old wrote it. And I hope that some of these people in the city that worked on this one can help them.
Thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, I would move this item with the suggested timeline that was discussed. So,
Timeline for the funding.
yes, we had a timeline that this would get to council on Tuesday.
Tuesday,
So
next
we would,
Tuesday.
with that direction, I would approve this item without objection. Okay.
Item 3.
Next item, item 3, yes.
The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has submitted their second quarterly status report. This has to do with employee health and dental plans.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Susana Reyes, Director of Human Resources in charge of employee health and benefits. Before you is our quarterly report updating you on the progress of our request for information that was sent out in August of last year. And majority of the carriers recommended a number of key programs, one of which is the wellness program, which the LADWP has already been implementing as of April of this year. We've also issued an RFP, a request for proposal for the for the health plans effective July 1st of this year. And that is a major opportunity for competitive bidding that we did. And the contracts are for a one-year basis only. We also did a thorough evaluation of our current health plan carriers. And so we have negotiated with them some basic improvements, one of which is the wellness program that the health plan carriers will sponsor for us. We've also had cost savings, cost containment and cost savings that remain a priority with LADWP. Mercer, our consultant, has negotiated savings of over $17 million since 2004. We recently received a refund or a surplus check from Blue Shield, a former health plan carrier, in the amount of $2.7 million, which will help offset our costs. And as part of the Healthcare Reform Act, we were approved by the federal government under the Affordable Care Act for reimbursement in the amount of $1.8 million for the Early Retiree Reinsurance Program, which is our ERRP. We have applied for another $1.2 million, but unfortunately the federal government's $5 billion earmarked fund was exhausted by all the other applications from other companies, and so we're awaiting word from them if they're still going to honor the $1.2 million that we were approved to be reimbursed. And of course, the last item on the report is the wellness committee that we have established, and we call it the Do Well, Be Well program, and affects all our active employees. And the goal is to really engage our population of employees to avoid chronic conditions, which really, those are the ones that add to the cost of our health, cost for the LADWP. I would entertain any questions at this point.
Yeah, before we got this report, I had actually never heard of the Early Retirement Reinsurance Program. I wonder if you could explain that to us a little bit. And also, do any of the city departments apply to that, or have they?
Yes. In fact, last year when we applied, I know Lacers has applied for it, and also the City of Los Angeles, our benefits program for the city personnel applied also for ERRP. And I'm not sure, I cannot speak for them as to how much they received, but the federal government under the ERRP will reimburse a plan sponsor of an employment-based health plan for some of the costs of the health care benefits paid on behalf of or by early retirees. In short, they had a threshold. You have to identify the early retirees whose health costs to the plan was at $15,000 or above. And so we did identify that data, and we have to meet certain requirements of the federal government, and we were able to apply that in September of 2010, and we received approval last year in December for the $1.8 million that we applied for. And unfortunately, as I stated earlier, we have another 1.2 in the hold, and probably another 500,000 also in the hold because the funds were exhausted.
And how much of a difference do you expect this Be Well, Do Well program to make? I mean, how extensive an effort is this?
Really, it's behavior modification. That's really the intent of the program, is to get our employees physically active and moving, and also to engage them in healthy behaviors. One of the plans in that particular Be Well, Do Well program is the health risk assessments, where employees will be asked to do their risk assessments with their health plan carriers so that they can identify where they are at risk early, and then they could adopt a prevention plan with their physicians, and there is also a mentoring and coaching part of it. We are also in partnership with Kaiser on the Thrive Across America. And this is one of the more popular programs where employees are asked to register, and they're allowed to be in teams, and they exercise 30 minutes a day per person, and they earn the points. And we have incentive programs or rewards for them sponsored by Kaiser. The team with the number one, the team that garners the most number of points will receive, I'm not sure exactly how much each of them will get, but I believe it's a Kindle Fire book, so that then they're able to make it as an incentive. Right now, we have about 800 employees registered in the program, which will run for about 3 months. And I believe the city of Los Angeles has a similar program with Kaiser.
Oh, I'd never heard about the city of LA having that program.
They do.
Interesting. Any other questions or comments? Anybody? If not, I would just move that we note and file this report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, item 5.
And item 5, what you have before you is a motion by Council Members Alarcon and Englander. This has to do with instructing the Department of Animal Services to improve its horse licensing online process.
So do we have anyone here to give us a report on this item?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. John Chavez with Animal Services. We're here to support this motion. We're happy, and we continuously are improving our online processing. You can actually purchase a horse license online, so we're happy to improve it and also to reach out to the community, working with the council offices on publicizing horse licensing.
90,000 horses.
That's hard for me to believe. Are we really sure we have 90,000 horses?
That's not our figure, Councilman. We license about anywhere from 1,400 to 1,600 horses a year, but that 90,000 figure, I'm not really sure where that came from.
Under the discount program?
I counted them.
He personally counted. Under the discount program, how long would the license be good for?
Well, the proposal said that this would be good for up to 5 years. Currently, our license is for 1 year, and it's $14.
And so if you license it for 5 years, what would the cost be to you?
For 5 years, it'd be $7. So you,
35.
pardon me?
$35.
$35, yeah.
So $7 a year.
Yes.
5 years. And does the city have an equine committee of some sort, and have they opined on this issue?
You know, before I came here, I actually looked it up on the city's website. I couldn't find any information on that, so I'm not familiar with that particular advisory committee.
There is something, because I've got a representative from my district on it, and she's got horses, and there is some kind of committee that deals with it. I don't know how well known.
Yeah,
Do you have-
we have the Los Angeles Equine Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
There is something.
So do we know if they are aware of this motion and agree with the concept?
I held a hearing of Arts Parks, and we discussed a variety of issues related to the equestrian issues, and this was raised. The Equine Advisory Committee is very strongly in favor of this because they support licensing and feel that it's a fundamental problem that we are not registering horses. If I could speak to the purpose of my motion, there are two streams of thought in the equine community: those who believe that we should register horses and those who are opposed to registering horses. It's sort of the free spirit nature of sort of the Western horse owners' tradition. But the problem comes in planning, where if we are not identifying horses and properties aren't identified as horse properties, the community plans do not recognize them as such, and therefore there's been incredible encroachment on horse properties. We know that there are horses out there that are not registered because the city picks up manure for a whole bunch of them, thousands of them, and yet those same addresses do not have registered horses. So, so number one, we should just, as a matter of good practice, seek to register horses. It's been a longstanding policy. And number two, with the underlying development issues that arise in communities that become very controversial, by the way, we really need to get a handle on this. And thirdly, the money that is generated from horse registration goes directly into improving the horse trails. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of it was a way, the policy thinking was it provided a way for the horse community to improve the nature of their community so that it served the needs of the horse community. So trails would be improved, but if they're not registering their horses, the city has failed to invest in these horse trails. And so you have some trails that go nowhere or that are dangerous, and some, like we're investigating crossings right now, where many animals have been struck by vehicles and had to be euthanized. So the Northeast San Fernando Valley, as well as the Northwest San Fernando Valley, have long-standing histories of equestrians, as well as the Griffith Park area, and so the goal is to look at this holistically. This is just one motion in a series of motions I introduced. The idea behind giving discount rates is to encourage people to register their horses in multiple years, so that most importantly, we get them into the system, identify them. But frankly, there's going to be a number of other issues that arise. For example, I wasn't aware of this, Mr. Caress, but you should be sensitive to this, and that is that if you have a corral and you have a horse, that property will be identified as a horse property. But if you don't have a horse, and the definition of not having a horse is whether it's registered or not, you lose the equestrian zoning. So there are many places that have horses, but they're not registered. They have corrals, but their property is not designated as a horse property, and there are certain setbacks from your neighboring properties that apply, and neighbors will come in and build something right next to the corral, which is a contradiction. So all this is to say that if everybody would register their horses, we could improve the trails, improve the development process, maintain improve actually the quality of our equestrian resources and community opportunities, and I think it just makes more sense.
I mean, it sounds like a win-win for everybody, honestly. So.
Well, you would think so, but quite frankly, there are people that are pushing up against the equestrian communities, and sometimes there's disharmony in the communities related to those who have horses and those who don't. Development interests sometimes run counter to the interests of the equestrian communities, and I just think it's a tremendous attribute that we should preserve. And I believe we can live in harmony if we get a hold of it, but if we don't, we're going to continue to have these problems. a good question.
Because the brown can is what they use for the horse droppings, and if we have that being picked up
Right.
with sanitation, then we could identify and send them a letter, pay for your horse.
We did. We actually got the listing of all the brown cans in the city.
How many do you have? How many lists?
I don't remember what that number was. We did find that about 400 of those brown cans did not, we would assume had horses, and they were not, there was no license in our system. So we sent out a licensing letter to those homes, and in the hopes of getting those horses to be licensed. Yes, we did. Yes, we're tallying up the figures. I don't have that information.
400 though.
Yes.
We need to find out how many have the brown cans, and then we can calculate that. Because Mr. Alarcon says there's 90,000. There's 90,000 out
Right.
there.
No, but most of them are hauled by private manure haulers.
Oh, they are.
Yes, so they're not all being picked up by the city.
Then we should get the private manure haulers. In other words, we should identify these.
Sure.
people, and for 50% off, $7 for 5 years, $35 to help what we need
Right.
to do. It's an opioid.
We will look at that, Councilman. We will work with sanitation. They were very helpful the first go-around. I'm sure they'll help us.
One of the realities that's occurring out there is that the manure haulers can no longer afford to haul. And one major manure hauler in my district went under, and we were taking the manure to Lopez Canyon and mulching it, but we ran out of capacity. So there is a possibility that we would explore the feasibility of having the city offer to haul all the manure, and the fees that would be generated from that would cover the costs. But it wasn't necessary because private industry was providing that service, but now it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to place that manure.
Hey, we have one speaker from the public on this item, Phyllis Doherty.
All right, Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. I'm not totally familiar, but I do know that the advisory committee out there is very, very strong. The way I ran into that actually was when we attempted to get a permit for Villa Scalabrini to extend the retirement community, and it was a horse property. But there were some real disadvantages on that property because the drain-off went right directly into a city waterway. So it wasn't too hard for us to go ahead and get that adjusted, especially since there'd been a lot of cockfighting going on the property. There were some other disadvantages. But I know the community came out very, very strongly, and they are very, very active. The county, I do work with the county horses in the city, but I have to wonder because it is really so bad in terms of the horse trails in the city. It's absolutely deplorable, the dangers that people are. I have to wonder why we're making such a tremendous discount when they're already a lot cheaper than a dog license even, and the money is needed so badly. It's a very small amount of money, even if you pay the entire amount. I can understand discounting for multiple years, that's a good idea, but if our purpose is to get money to spend on the horse trails, why would we give this kind of a discount when it probably isn't necessary? I think that if you get people to license, they're not going to be offended by having to pay less than $15 a year, and you'll have more money coming in. So I just think that the discount is way, way too much for this. We need the money for the horses.
Thank you.
Well, the answer to that question is I wanted to get as many years in as possible, to get more horses registered as possible, and create the greatest incentive that we could in the short term, so that we can get horses registered as quickly as possible. As I said, the equestrian community is not 100% in favor of registering horses, so it's going to take quite an incentive to get them to do that. The discount, the money amount, I mean, if you can afford a horse, the $14 a year it's not really a cost issue, so the goal is the number of years. I believe it's obnoxious for people to have to go someplace every year to register their horse. That's why they don't do it. But if they could do it 5 years, they would do it, particularly if we offered a discount. So there's no magic number. I'm just trying to incentivize the process as much as possible. If somebody else has another proposal, I'm happy to hear it, but the bottom line is we're not registering horses. The fact, and by the way, we're only registering, if we only have, what was it, 1,900 horses? 1,900 times 10 is what, I don't know, 1,400? So times...
It's about $18,000 a year.
$18,000 a year we're generating. I just donated $100,000 to improve our trails. That should not be the goal. And I had an offer from somebody to donate $50,000 on top of that. So that is not the. And you're right. I don't even have a horse. I have many horses. I represent many horses. But so the amount of money is not that much, quite frankly. It's getting them identified that will help us preserve these communities.
All right. The only other thing I want to ask you, Richard, has Animal Services Commission ever looked at this issue, and would it be helpful for us to encourage them, not necessarily to hold up
The
this
Department of
particular
Rep, I think, could answer that question as well as I could, but generally speaking, they want to get these horses registered. There's no advantage for them to not do that. I apologize, Mr. Chair.
You want to send this to that committee?
I'm not.
But the answer is.
I just sort of want to get feedback on whether you think there'd be any.
No. I had a conversation with Brenda Barnett, and she was very intrigued by the idea. She liked the idea. Generally speaking, she wants to register more horses, and she showed no indication that she was opposed to this whatsoever.
I'm just wondering, maybe that it would be interesting for them to have a session on horse issues in general, because I think that's something that the city that hasn't focused on much. The commission.
Why don't we approve this and send it to them? And still go on their set track.
Maybe
we're
supposed to, I don't know. Who sets that rate? I thought the council did.
So it's just for information.
Yeah, I think we should move this item forward to council, but if you have.
Maybe we could
interest
ask the
in
city
recommending-
attorney to find out if we have the authority to regulate this. I assume we did, so I could be wrong. Maybe it's the Animal Commission.
You know, we'd have to have the city attorney responsible for animal services report back on that
Yeah.
issue, and he's not here.
But they could do that in the
Audience.
interim, right? If we
Right.
sent this to council, they could.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
But do you want to send it to the commission also? So they'll.
As information.
Yeah.
Why don't we send it to them as an informational item, but let's.
Well, in terms of the process, by approving the motion, you're concurring with Arts Parks, and you're sending it to council just so that the motion is approved and the department is officially instructed to comply. That's all you're doing.
But then we want to.
wants us to notify the commission, Animal Regulations Commission.
Once the council adopts the motion, all of this information is available online
Well,
to
no,
the
we want-
department
No,
and the commission.
No, we want
No,
to.
we want to know their opinion.
We want to send it to the commission. Can you take it?
Yes,
to the
we
commission?
could schedule that for the Board of Animal Services Commissioners, yes.
That's what we want.
Great.
Okay.
So that will be moved without objection.
Yes.
Thank you. And then the last item is our closed session. Oh, actually, there's one speaker under public comment. If you'd still like to do that, I'll have you do that before we go into closed session and clear the room.
I'm sorry, Councilman Alarcon left because I brought thanks to him from the captains, Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. The captains returned, as I hope you read the news article. All the captains returned. No criminal charges because there was no wrongdoing. It was very disappointing to see the council more or less jump into that and commend Ms. Barnett for cleaning up the department. And there has been nothing to clean up. All of these things, the guns, the dogs, the vending machines, have been created crisis. She's created them in the media and within the city so that she could appear to clean something up, but all of the information has come back from the police department, from personnel everywhere, that there was nothing wrong. If you could have seen the security that they did on on guns in there, if anyone would have taken the time to have talked to one of them about how many layers of security to get a gun out of that department, you would have been surprised at how well it was managed for all these years. That's why there have not been complaints on these issues. Just very briefly on this vending machine issue, I want to tell you how that came about. The General Services used to provide vending machines. These shelters were so remote, nobody wanted to service them, so the little mom and pops were able to come in and provide that service so that there could be cold drinks in these areas, because animal control employees cannot go and leave the shelter in the middle of the night. They have to be there for emergencies. There was nothing wrong. There was no wrongdoing, and no one broke the law. I think I would hope that you are going to begin to ask Ms. Barnett for some facts and figures, as you do all of these other city managers when she comes in here with an issue, because we still have employees off. That cost $426,000 just for employees, let alone the police department and everything else, that costs that went into that. You need to start asking for why these things are being done so that you can gauge the effectiveness of the management of this department. You are taking it for granted on emotion that it's being done well. Look at the blood on the freeways, and you'll see that we're not doing very well.
Thank you. All right, if we can now go into closed session to discuss item number 1 and 6.
Council member, item number 1 is an agendized as a closed session matter, but I understand if item 6 may affect your decision on 1, but your vote or action on number 1 has to be taken outside of closed session, and you can wait until after you've completed, but just don't take the action in closed session.
We'll do that, but we'll go into closed session under item number 6. So if we could ask that everyone not related here on city staff related to item number 6.
Council member, is it okay if the labor relations law clerks remain?
I think that would be fine.
Thank you. On item 1, and then I think the closed session item, the personnel report was for note and file, was the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of a consensus we have on this body. I'd be inclined to approve the exemptions as they are. If I was trying to reach a compromise with the other opinions I've heard, we would in some way move the exemptions but attach a time period like 2 years, and if the positions appeared to be needing an extensive period of time before that, then recommend that those become civil service positions. I'm not making a motion, I'm just trying to get feedback from my colleagues to see if there's a consensus on it. Mr. Alarcon, where are you thinking?
Can they do that?
I've said many times that I have no problem with the exempt positions. I only have a concern that if they're long-term, they be civil service. But we need to hire people into these positions quickly to manage this portfolio. So I also am more concerned about the other positions that we plan on hiring to manage the portfolio on an ongoing basis. But the 3 exempt positions are not the critical thing. I would like to express publicly that I believe, to the full extent possible, the department should give every possible consideration to the CRA employees. But once we declare them exempt, we sort of lose control of, I mean, the department has the authority to pick who they please on an exempt position.
Well, and I know the purpose of civil service is obviously to avoid that to some degree and to guarantee there's not nepotism and favoritism and everything else. But I think this is also
the purpose of civil service is to protect their rights, the employees' rights. So if they're exempt position, it leans more heavily toward fire at will principles. They are not protected. That's why we want to preserve the civil service system, is to preserve the employees' rights. So I want to make it very clear. That's why I draw that distinction.
No, and I understand all that, but at the same time, if employees were hired from the CRA, I think they would be happier to have the right to be hired than to be worried about their at-will status for a period of time. So I'd be inclined just to approve the exemptions and to give an informal direction that if this looks like positions that'll be long-term after they've been in existence for a while, that we start to move towards civil service on those positions, say given in a couple of years, but with that more informal direction.
When you say informal direction, do you want that incorporated onto the committee report or leave it out? Because informal implies that you're not making a direction for council adoption.
Well, we can encourage them to look at a switch in the positions to civil service at a period of around a couple of years, but I'm trying to leave some flexibility there as well. Does that sound satisfactory?
Well, my concern, I agree with Mr. Alarcon about the rights, that there has to be protected rights. There also has to be equal opportunities. And if it wasn't for a civil service system, there's a lot of folks that probably wouldn't have a job in the city of Los Angeles. So there's a lot of concern that equal opportunities for all individuals, regardless of race, creed, religion, et cetera. And I'm a strong supporter of the equal opportunities for all in the competitive process. So I don't have any problem with finding jobs for CRA people looking for work. I'm also concerned about city employees who are on a list or want to be on a list or want to receive a promotion and get passed by because someone takes that spot and there isn't that opportunity that would normally be in the process. I've got concerns that opportunities for all exist, and there is that process that we need to maintain. So I understand what the city attorney has said, and I understand the legal side of it. So you need these positions. You've got 50 vacancies. I just want to make sure that the system is clean, that fairness and equality prevails, period. Otherwise, it starts to be a very negative situation, and we don't want that. So I trust you in your leadership in that department. You've worked for a lot of different departments and general managers over the years, so I just want to make sure that people don't say that, you know, this was favoritism, nepotism, whatever the case may be. So I'll go along with that. But it is about rights for the employees, also equal opportunities for everyone.
Mr. Chair, I concur with what Mr. Zine said. Essentially, this hiring of these 3 exempt positions is a precursor to a greater hiring that will occur later down the road. So that trust is important. So the extent to which the department evidences that trust, we will have other considerations when we hire more employees.
So without objection, that passes as described.
So for the record, you're approving the exemption request as is.
Approving the exemption request and giving informal encouragement to move those positions to civil service if they last longer than 2 years.
And Councilman, item number 6 was a note and file.
Oh, yes. Without objection, note and file for item number 6. Thank you.